Around 3 years ago, I hit Pirate Legend for the first time. Being completely new to the game, it took me about 3 months and change of playing once or twice a week to finally reach this goal. But how fast would I be today? With all the new systems, factions, and content in Sea of Thieves and all the experience accumulated since then, how long would it take me today to achieve that same goal? Can I turn 100 real-life days of grinding into 100 in-game days? One day is 24 minutes, by the way. That is what I want to find out, but in order to get there any faster than I did back then, I need to do a lot of things a lot better, beginning with my factions of choice. There's a bit more to choose from than there was back in the day, and since I have to get 3 of them to rank 50 in order to claim my legend status, the choice was an important one. For starters, I figured I should go with a gold standard, the Reaper's Bones. This was my faction of choice to finish my grind, so now it is only fitting that they'd be the ones to start me off on this adventure. And I wouldn't start it empty-handed. Not only did I get 25,000 gold from the hidden stash in the tutorial, but Rare bestowed upon me a generous 50,000 gold simply for existing. There was enough to get me all the basic supplies I needed, so I used my supply crate to run around the island and collect anything I could get my hands on. And that's already all the preparation I need, because where other factions require you to reach level 15 in order to get an emissary flag, all the Reaper's Bones ask of you is to bring 20,000 golds. Meaning I was off to the races with an Emmy on day 2 already. As most of you are going to know, the higher the level on the emissary flag, the more gold, and more importantly, reputation I'm going to get when selling. And to get that flag leveled up, I needed treasure. The beautiful thing being that it doesn't matter what kind of treasure. Unlike most other factions in the game, the Reapers don't actually care what you collect as long as you sell it to them, meaning my first course of action was beelining it towards the nearest world event in order to start my grind. It was PvE business as usual. I completed the Phantom Fleet by day 3 and fittingly got enough treasure for my emissary flag to match that number. The next world event in line was a Ford of Fortune. I mean, yeah, I'd rather do anything else than park up as a Reaper at a FOF just to get tucked on. Thankfully, I found a message in a bottle that gave me not only a skeleton hunting quest, but also a map with a bunch of buried treasure all in the opposite direction of the fort. By the start of day 4, I had completed both of these voyages with my Emmy finally hitting rank 5, and since it was currently gold rush hour, I decided to sell my goods on the spot. Which is when I spotted a burning blade coming right towards me. You know what that means, right? Somebody completed the Fort of Fortune, and lucky me, that somebody ended up being a sloop that was still at the fort. There was no better time than now to put those Wraith cannonballs to good use, which I got off the Phantom Fleet, but little did I know that using them would be complete overkill. Sorry. Oh my goodness gracious! Chat, don't do that! Yeah, I know a Wraith cannonball has about the strength of a gunpowder keg, but these explosions were entirely on him. You know what else was on him? This treasure that I was about to put on my vessel. And since it was right next to me, I decided to take on the burning blade as well before selling my loot. Man, I remember when these things were really scary to me, but now they're just massive galleons that you can't sail in front of. Now, it did take me until the late hours of day 5 to sink the burning blade, which gave another sloop some time to run up on me. That would certainly be cause to worry until I realized, if it is the same guy, I don't know that I need to be... It is the same guy. Okay. I don't know how worried I need to be. But then again, he didn't really get a chance to fight, so he might be good. He shot at the rock. I think I'm okay. And I was. Even though he now had a second pirate to help him, it was fairly obvious that while I was posing as a new player, these guys probably were actual new players. Seal clubbing is unfortunately part of the game, and if I wanted to get Pirate Legend as quickly as possible, I could not afford to show mercy, even in the face of inexperience. By the end of day 6, I had accumulated 12 levels with the Reaper's Bones and over 600,000 gold, meaning it was time to purchase myself a captained vessel. Though to honor my sloop, I did grant it a Viking funeral, just like in the old days. This whole challenge has kind of got me into a nostalgic mood, so I figured it was only fitting to equip my new pirate with some of the old pieces of clothing that I used to wear. My eyes so far apart, bro. Say hello to my latest creation, Crag, the narrative lad. Now, it seemed like Crag was about to pay for the seal clubbing that led to the purchase of his new vessel, with another sloop running up on me as I was supplying up. Now, if you think that I was willing to face the consequences of my actions, you'd be dead wrong, because naturally, I decided to hop onto a different server the moment I sailed out of reach. Obviously, I'd be up to my usual shenanigans, just kind of killing some time while I was waiting for a world event to spawn, which in this case was Ashen Winds. I got to Wanderer's Refuge on day 8, where I proceeded to absolutely annihilate this event. I used to be able to solo Ashen Winds in about 3 to 5 minutes using a sword and a blunderbuss, but now I could knock this thing out in less than 2 minutes. 1 minute and 42 seconds to be exact, simply by spamming throwing knives, a feat that was surprising not just to me, but even to the game itself. Why is this still here? That's not supposed to be here. Did I kill the boss too fast? Somebody's gonna be very disappointed when they show up here. Now, that was a certified pirate game memento. You will notice that I've gotten through all that effort without a Reaper flag, and that's because I wanted to set myself up for being able to grind out other factions as well. I need 3 of them at level 50 after all. So now that I had my captain vessel and with it access to the sovereigns, I could go about increasing my reputation with the main factions. At that point, I had not yet decided which ones I would end up going for other than the Reaper's Bones. All I knew was that I desperately wanted to get to level 15 with them to be able to access all of their emissary flags as well as pinnacle voyages. That was until I spotted the next world event in line, a skeleton fleet. Now, this is always my go-to event to level up a Reaper flag, because to my knowledge it is the only world event that gives you enough treasure to go from emissary rank 1 to 5 in one fell swoop. Not to mention that all but the final wave are incredibly easy. At least all of that would be accurate wasn't it for a very annoying bug that caused the first wave to not grant me any treasure. But what was I supposed to do? Not finish the event out of spite? It was definitely a little frustrating to put in all that effort into completing an event and not get the promised rank 5 emissary that I needed to warrant selling anything in the first place. I had no choice but to complete another event before selling, and as luck would have it, another naval-based encounter was ripe for the taking as I decided to sink yet another burning blade. And it was supposed to be that simple, but if there's one thing that fleet should have prepared me for, it's that things don't always go according to plan. Wait, no, don't do it! Oh my god, what is happening? I think they're like, how am I gonna sink them if they're stuck? There's no water. How do you sink that which cannot be sunk? Wait, what? Huh? Yeah, maybe I shouldn't have complained about my loot despawning, because now the entire event despawned. Obviously, with the event gone, there was also no treasure, and without treasure, no rank 5 for me. Since I wasn't getting that max rank anyway, I decided to sell my treasure at the Sovereigns to instead get some progress on my other factions. But needless to say that one single event that didn't even spawn its entire treasure pool was not going to get me very far. You can probably imagine that at this point I was pretty annoyed. So annoyed that I forgot to record myself killing this random Megalodon that spawned on me. And this is not only where I finally got my flag to rank 5, but I also found out that Megalodon loot has been buffed. Back in the day, these things fulfilled one unified purpose, which was to be as annoying as humanly possible without dropping anything of value. But now, they dropped entirely new items that I've never actually seen before. Obviously, one Megalodon worth of loot was not really grounds for stopping at an outpost, but my curiosity still got the better of me, so I decided to jump off with this new item just to see how much that specifically would sell for. And I mean, over 2,000 gold for a pristine board tusk seemed like a pretty good value to me. But what really blew me away was the reputation, because that one item got me from level 1 all the way to level 5 in one fell swoop. And I get it, the first few levels are always the fastest, but I've also been selling tons of other treasure, and all of my other companies are still under level 10, with the exception of the Reaper's Bones, of course. You can probably imagine that this piqued my interest. With no emissaries to hunt and me being kind of burned out on world events, I decided to sail on over to the Shores of Plenty in order to retire my Reaper allegiance for the day, sink a swabby that decided to pick a fight with me, and find out if fishing is any easier today than it was 3 years ago. God, I really hope the new voyages are better than that. How did I do that for 50 levels? Oh my goodness. 150 gold and next to no reputation. Yeah, that's to put into perspective how difficult it used to be to level up the fishing faction of the Hunter's Call. I mean, back in the day, they didn't even have any voyages, so all you could do was do actual fishing as you just saw me do. But now there's a plethora of new activities that I was dying to try out. Once I was of the appropriate level, the only voyage that was available to me was the most basic fishing voyage, sending me to a nearby small island to, well, go fishing. The rare devs must have seen some of my videos because they made this quest incredibly idiot-proof, even spelling out the name of the island at the top. So obviously, this is exactly where I went. Waiting for me was a kind of cloudy-looking bit of water with a total of 3 very feisty fish. Unlike regular fish, these don't end up in my inventory, but become actual pieces of loot, and as such, they can be neither cooked nor consumed. But what they lack in caloric benefit, they more than make up for in monetary benefit, because this fish sold for a whopping 750 gold and got me a lot more reputation than the basic one I sold last night. That alone was reason enough for me to want to add the Hunter's Call to my list of factions to pursue for pirate legendhood, and that's before I found out that my other fish were even more valuable. 1,500? Take this. 2,000 1,500 for one fish? Okay, we're going fishing. Words cannot describe how happy I am about this update. Let the old days of grinding for grinding's sake be over, because this was a lot more fun. Which doesn't mean that I didn't have to grind at all. I immediately plopped on another fishing voyage to continue progressing towards that coveted level 15. So that's exactly what I did. Day after day after day, I diligently completed my fishing quests. Though just for a bit of a change of pace, I did decide to plop down my government-issued lucky voyage, which unfortunately only granted me a rank 5 Reaper flag to sell. But I also defeated every skelly ship, hunted every Megalodon, and scoured every shipwreck I could get my hands on, because even though fishing is undeniably less grindy than it was a few years ago, it took me until day 16 just to get to level 10, at which point I unlocked the large island fishing quest, though I expected that to be pretty much the same as the small one. Though before I got to try it out, another sloop came up to me asking for an alliance, and that, my friend, was a very interesting experience.
Sir, you need to go to the crow's nest. If you don't know, you have to go to the crow's nest.
I love how he gives me instructions.
Hopefully I can find more.
Oh, how funny that guy was. What, is he trying to recruit every ship on the server? Because that is exactly what it looks like. Not only did bro just use his Jinwoo level aura to recruit that brigantine, said brigantine also just so happened to fly under the flag of the Hunter's Core. You know what that means? Every time they sell their fish, I get rewarded with a portion of the gold and reputation. Now, if this was a challenge run, I'd be against teaming up with anyone in the first place. But you know, even back in the day, alliances were something I took advantage of on my grind to PL. So seeing as I'm trying to recreate that experience, I have no problem taking advantage of that situation. As did he, because our grand leader came back to me after raising a Hunter's Call emissary of his own, asking if it'd be okay for him to touch the fish I caught to get a kickstart on his levels. And it didn't take long for that alliance to bear fruit, because just as I arrived in New Golden Sands to sell my own fish, the brigantine had already begun unloading their treasure at a different outpost. But even with their help, getting to level 15 for my own emissary flag was going to be a long and arduous process, so I had no choice but to continue to fish. Sparing you the boring details, it took me until day 21 to get that flag, from which point on, getting more levels should be a lot easier. Especially because our Supreme Overlord returned the favor and let me hold his loot to get a kickstart on said flag to level 3. And in the process, I spotted some very new, very interesting looking pieces of treasure that I was dying to uncover for myself. Because ladies, gentlemen, and non-binary homies, level 15 did not just grant me access to the emissary flag, but also to the boar hunting mission. That one would send me to Wanderer's Refuge once again in order to track down a beast and steal back the treasure it was holding onto. Stupidly enough, I forgot to stack up with food and spears, so the hunt was a little more challenging than it should have been. Now, I would love to hype up this quest, but there really isn't anything special to it. You're just hunting a thing with more HP than it has any right to have. But it did give me a decent amount of treasure. Speaking of bullet sponges, Karen decided to spare me a visit as I sailed off, allowing me to find out that her loot pool was updated just like the Megalodon's. Not that I got anything good off of her though, the most valuable thing she had were these pieces of cheesecake. But just to illustrate to you how big of a difference a rank 5 emissary makes to your ability to farm reputation, I absolutely flew from rank 15 to 22 in about 2 days. And because I just passed level 20, I also had access to the next hunting voyage, the Megalodon hunt. Now, I really wish I had something good to say about this quest, but really all you're doing is using a magical spyglass to follow some random red lines until a bog standard Megalodon pops up. Though if that was all there's to it, that'd be fine. Unfortunately though, did it run away again? I really thought once was enough. Yeah, somebody at Rare HQ must really love the rule of 3. Now, the worst part is that this isn't all that's bad about it. Both of the hunting missions at the time of recording this video give you lower quality loot than fighting the wild version of both of these creatures. When it comes to gold per hour, it is hands over fist so much worse than just going out fishing, but it also just feels worse to get the trash iteration of something you know you could otherwise sell for a lot of money. What I needed, my friends, was a real Megalodon hunt, and not just any Megalodon, but an ancient one. You see, much like the Reaper flag, the Hunter's Call emissary gives you a special ability at rank 5, but rather than seeing other emissary ships, you can find the location of ancient Megalodons, boss versions of the regular nerds that hopefully will give us better rewards. So as soon as I spotted one and not currently engaged with my alliance, I decided to head on over to try and take it out before somebody could steal it from me. Ironically, a regular Megalodon spawned on me on the way to the boss fight, but naturally I had no time to stop and fight it, because now it was time to fight the Barnacle Dread. I'm not scared of you. Oh, wait, whoa, hold up, wait. Who invited you? Ow, what the f— does he just randomly do that? Okay, I can't even shoot that. Oh my lord! Wow. Okay, that's a lot of damage. Turns out the Barnacle Dread was a lot more feisty than your average Megalodon. Fighting this thing solo was bound to be an uphill battle. Between repairing the damage and dealing with its minions, I barely had a window of opportunity to even fire my cannons. At one point, I had a red hit marker usually indicating my target's defeat, but this time it meant that I merely destroyed one bit of its armor. There was a lot of it to go around, so taking this thing out was going to take a lot of time. Though since it really enjoyed attacking me from outside my cannon range, I decided to pick up one of my Disney sticks to fire back anyway, and that ended up working surprisingly well, even taking care of another bit of armor on its fin. Also shout out to my alliance for selling fish while I was doing this. Things heated up even more when the storm fell onto us. I had no choice but to anchor my ship for any chance to land a shot, and I was very glad I made that choice because another chomp of my vessel caused me to fly right off of it. I know I wanted to fight this thing by myself to reap all the rewards, but now I was actually kind of sad about the brigantine leaving the alliance because Lord knows this fight was not looking good for me. I was already having a hard time in broad daylight, but with the storm now here, every bit of damage was even more dangerous as more and more water filled my ship's hull. Thankfully, just as I lost track of the beast, I found the last ship of my alliance having come to my rescue, and together with a final blast of my cannon, it was defeated. As was I. Yep, with its dying breath, it had actually managed to take my ship along with it. I might have stopped its last bite, but the damage I took whilst in the storm was enough to sink my boat. Thankfully, the only ones I had to fight for the treasure were a bunch of sharks because my alliance had no intention of taking it away from me.
Do you need my help for anything, or do you have it under control?
I'll be fine, but thank you.
Alright, good luck.
Thanks. But how fine I really was will have to end up being a tale for another time. And if you don't want to miss out on episode 2 of my Road to Pirate Legend anew, make sure you subscribe and maybe even drop me a like on your way out if you enjoyed this video. I currently have a lot of very big projects in the works that I'm sure you're going to like as much as you like this one. But until then, thank you everybody so much for watching. I hope you guys have a day filled with riches on the sea, and until next time.